Welcome back to Midlife Unleashed. Today we're flipping the script on aging because, let's be honest, midlife gets a bad rap. So slowing down, losing energy, gaining weight. But what if this chapter could actually be your prime? So Doug's here to challenge the myths and show us what it really looks like to thrive, not just survive, through midlife and beyond. So Doug, let's start here. I'm excited to jump into
Yeah,
this episode.
me too.
So, why do you think that so many people tend to associate midlife with decline instead of possibility?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I'm 58 years old. That's kind of how I grew up. That midlife was a slow fade. Once you hit your 40s and 50s, it was all downhill. It was over. The best was behind you. And as I grew up, that was like somewhat reinforced. Like you'd watch a TV show and the midlife people always were like a punchline and a joke, or
Mm,
or they were just the older parents getting ready for retirement. And they were never uh, um, characters that were like thriving in midlife. There weren't many shows about midlife. And so I think people have kind of grown up with that concept. And the lifespan has gotten longer. Um and so and so when you come up with that, you kind of believe that mentality, and that's where I think a lot of that has kind of come from.
hmm Yeah, that does make sense. I would have never really thought of it in that way, really. But even like going back to shows I watched as a kid or a teenager, you'd see people in like their 30s and 40s, being referred to as old or looking so much older and, than they look now. So I would have never even correlated like growing up in shows and how that would play into that role of midlife, but that does make complete sense. It's like a whole new
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
perspective
Like
on
the narrative was broken. I
it.
mean, like that's really what it came down to. And I know for me, I started to see that really wasn't the truth. And
Right.
I noticed it myself just by keeping my health up, just by staying active, just by doing things as I approached midlife that were different, but were just as robust. Right. And then, really what really kind of turned the light bulb on for me was training people in midlife. I was, seeing people not only just losing weight and looking better, but being stronger, being more confident, actually like taking on life and just being more motivated and active than they were decades before. So that's when I knew that, okay, yeah, this doesn't have to be some sort of slow decline, and we can keep this thing going at midlife, just like we were at any other stage of our life prior to this.
Absolutely. So, to you, what does like thriving in midlife actually look like? Physically, emotionally, mentally? What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, thriving is like freedom. It's freedom in your body. It's freedom in your schedule. It's freedom in your relationships. I mean, it's all of those things. And thriving isn't quite a destination. I don't look at it as a destination. I look at it as, a practice. And I just want to become better and better at the practice of thriving. You know, it may not be a place that you'll ever get to, but as long as you're looking at it as a way that you can still continue to grow, then midlife will always be an open door for you to experience whatever it is that thriving means, to you.
Right. And in your experience with all the different clients you have and everyone that you train and have come across, do you have a particular client story that really shows that transformation in action?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of stories. Um, I think in particular when you talk about midlife, I recently had a client. She actually came into my clinic for red light therapy. So she was thinking that the red light therapy was going to help her lose some weight, which that's not the purpose of red light therapy. But she's 60 years old, menopausal, puffy, stuck, frustrated, trying to lose weight. And, nothing was working. And when I asked her, what she was doing, she was running at 60, which is impressive, but unnecessary. And, on one of those low calorie diets. And it wasn't getting her any results. And so what I had to do was kind of revamp a plan, create a plan for her, which obviously involved strength training, 4 days a week, getting rid of the running, turning it into walking, and tweaking her diet, making sure that there was enough protein in there, and then getting her set up with a hormone specialist. And, between all of that, 6 months later, she's down 30 pounds, feeling strong, feeling confident, looking great, and so how that's impacted her just by focusing on the muscle, the metabolism, the hormones, that's a recipe that creates a lot of success at midlife. But I've seen plenty of stories. I mean, once you get started, then and you realize that there's the possibility out there is endless, then a lot of great things happen. A lot of great things happen.
And you talk about this a lot. You talk about strength training, hormones, metabolic health as kind of the secret sauce, if you will, for
Mhm.
midlife success. So, why are these especially critical as we age?
Well, because a lot of times your hormones are on a decline. Now we know that, muscle is like an armor, a protective armor for your health, not just in looking good, but keeping your joints strong, you know, making sure that, you're resilient to insulin. It makes it works, keeps your mitochondria nice and strong and healthy, cognitive health. It just does so many things for you to improve your health that it has to be part of the equation, right? And then, there's the hormones are on the decline, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all those things are kind of impacting your health. And so, having a way to kind of combat those for those who need it also is helping. So I like to say, I mean, I gotta say, it's a great time to be in midlife right now because there are so many tools that are out there that can kind of help and support. And we know so much more information in terms of the strength training, in terms of the science, right? In terms of hormone replacement therapy. I mean, that's being talked about. Before that was just, people would just whisper about it.
Hmm.
Now people, are talking about it, and all the research that's going on in relationship to longevity,
Hmm.
and how we can get better quality of life and expand the time span of it. There's like longevity conferences all the time. I'm seeing franchises pop up just focusing on longevity. um, there's this booming field of peptides that are out there that, everyone's just starting to kind of dig into. I mean, all those things are tools that can help people to improve the quality of their life, during midlife.
Absolutely. And what happens, let's say, when people tend to kind of ignore these areas? Like, what are, I guess, some of the most common signs that you see in your clinic?
Decline, muscle loss. I mean, those are like the big ones.
Yeah.
We don't do any hormone testing or anything like that in our clinic. We refer it out. But, once someone's getting, blood work and, a professional's looking at it, you can see where the aging is taking place, right? And there's just too many examples out there now that we can see that midlife can be a prime time, or you can still have great quality during midlife. I mean, you look at J Lo and Holly Berry, and and it doesn't have to be celebrities, but they're in their 50s and they're holding it and they're kicking it and they're killing it. And you look at Joan McDonald, she was like in her 70s when she started working out, or Ernestine Shepherd, she was in her 80s, and these women look like amazing. Like their like quality of life is very, very high. And it doesn't have to be just the celebrity people or this. You can just go on social media and you can see that, people are documenting their strength training, they're documenting their how they're managing their hormones, they're documenting, what they're doing. And the good thing about that is that's changing the narrative about what midlife is. Right
Mhm.
now, that's opening up the door for other people to think, hey, why can't I do this? Or, what's the possibility for me? Or maybe I ought to, think about this a little differently, or, maybe I ought to try something. So it's a positive time, I think, if you open your eyes for midlife, um, that you no longer have to struggle. The information's out there. And just by starting with some strength training and fixing your diet, you're on your way.
Right, yeah, it is. It's a whole different, time to go through this period of life. There is so much, like you said, information on social media, and there are so many resources, and there's experts like you. There's all this information that wasn't available before that is really changing like the whole perspective of it. It's like you do see these, like you said, like J Lo and yes, celebrities, but like you're how old? And so it's just it's like it's motivating. I mean, granted,
Absolutely.
most people don't have celebrity status, but even
You
regular
don't have to
people
be.
that take care of themselves and, like you said, change their diet and, you know, really work on themselves. Midlife doesn't have to, be the way it was before.
No, it's all in the way, people kind of think, what your mind
Mhm.
believes, your body will follow, and so if you look at this as, possibility versus, limitations, then, next thing you know, you're working on better health, better vitality, better longevity, all those things go with it. But, you gotta believe it, and then you gotta move on it.
For sure. So let's get real. What's like one thing, for example, that most people, let's say in their 40s and their 50s, don't realize that they should be doing for their health right now?
Number one thing, building muscle. Number one thing. Now, I've been saying this for the longest time, but now all the research is really, really coming out and supporting the value of muscle as we age. It helps everything, everything. Joints, insulin sensitivity, metabolism, balance, cognitive health. It helps everything. And the way you want to think about it, or the way I would tell it to someone is, this is so important to your future that you have to invest the time in building that muscle now. And if you're not going to do it now, it's almost the same as not saving for your retirement now. Okay, you're going to suffer the consequences when you're 70 and you're 80 years old if you're not saving for your retirement now. It's the same way with building that muscle. If you're not building muscle now to help you in the long run, then you're ultimately going to suffer the consequences of it, which is usually poor health.
And how can someone start today, even if they feel behind, if they feel they should have started earlier? What would be the best way for them to start today?
Start, right? So you got to start, you got to start first of all, and you got to be smart. Okay, because it's a little bit different when we don't have youth on our side, right? So when you're in midlife, the one thing we don't want or we can't afford is a setback or an injury. And so that's why I say, if someone's behind or this, don't try to catch up real fast. Just start smart, start small, right? Body weight exercises, bands, light dumbbells, machines, things that you're not going to get hurt when you're starting to build that foundation, right? Then after you build that foundation, then you can kind of take it to the next level. But I would strongly encourage, people who are just starting, especially at midlife, hire the trainer, right? It's worth the money to have someone guide you and make sure that you're actually following, proper guidelines and they're progressing you properly. Or do some sort of beginner program, or you can even DM me and I'll point you in the direction to kind of get started, because the one thing you don't want is an injury. And if you get going too fast or do too much, it just takes us too long to heal at midlife. I mean, like, that's the reality of it. Like I said, we're not these little spring chickens, that can bounce back from an injury like that. So you don't want one, but that's all right. You don't have to have one if you just do it smart, be progressive, be consistent, and then kind of progress, along with fueling your body. That's the best way for somebody, to get started. But I would strongly encourage people to seek assistance and professional guidance, especially at midlife. And at midlife, we can afford it. So that's a good thing too.
There you go.
You know,
That's one of the advantages being versus
Mhm.
a spring
It
chicken.
is. It absolutely is.
And you've worked with people who have, completely changed their lives after 40, after 45. What do those success stories have in common with each other?
Um, they all, I would say, mindset. They all they all came in with the idea that they wanted to improve their health and get better, right? That's how it always starts. That's how it always starts. And then what happens is they start to see that, hey, this works, because that's the way the body responds when you put it under stress and pressure. And they start to think, well, what else is possible? Or, like, what about me? Or why not me, I should say. And then that's when the light bulb goes off and they really start to make some significant, gains. I mentioned Joan McDonald and Ernestine Shepherd. Those women did not know they were going to be where they were when they started. I just would never believe that, because when you look at the success that they've had and what they've done in transforming their bodies, it's mind blowing. But nobody starts there. You just get started, right? And then you have some ups and downs, but you keep going, you get consistent. And next thing you know, you start to build some trust in yourself. And that trust starts to build a little momentum. And then the momentum leads to transformation. And that's how it works. So I've seen people, I've seen 80-year-olds lift their first dumbbells, and within 6 months to a year they're pushing a sled with as much weight as their body. So like, your body's going to respond to any stress that you put on it. And if you put it on there intelligently and with some guidance, and then you fuel behind it, meaning making sure that you're eating properly, protein, carbs, getting rest, then you'll start to see that muscle grow, and it'll build and you'll get all the benefits of it.
And you're giving all this great advice and the way to do it, and have pretty much broken it down into such a simplified way. But I'm sure that there's someone listening, or multiple people listening, who still are probably thinking, oh, but not me. It's too late for me. It sounds easy, but, kind of having doubts of themselves. So
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who's thinking it's too late for me?
It's never too late. It's never too late. It's only too late if you don't start. And see, I've been around this industry and working out and exercising and nutrition and all this, for so long, that it for me, it comes really simple. If you show up and do the work, your body will respond. And a lot of people don't think that, but this isn't like rocket science what we're doing when we're helping somebody to kind of build muscle. It's like innate in you to actually want to be healthy. And if you do the things that will allow you to grow muscle or be stronger, then your body's going to do that. That's how it responds. That's how it responds. So it's never too late. I mean, there's just too many cases out there of how people have been successful at any age. And so the only way it doesn't work is if you don't do anything. If you don't start, then it doesn't work. If you start, it works, especially at midlife.
Or like you said, how do you start? You just start. You start. You take
You
one step forward.
That's all. That's all. You start squatting, you start doing some body weight exercises, you start, sitting on those machines and pushing those weights and just being smart about it and eating along with it, then the body responds. It really does. And like I said, you can see it with any time you go on social media, there's people 50, 60, 70, 80 just in their game.
Right.
Now,
And
you don't have
so
to do all the time that they're doing. They're probably spending more time than I know they spend a lot more time than I spend working out, but it is an example of how your body responds when you put it under the stressors.
mhm. And everyone's different. Different things will work for different people, and maybe going slower and longer works for certain people too. And maybe that's also, especially in midlife or even later, if you have time to do certain things and you dedicate that time to really working on you, and it becomes something you actually genuinely enjoy doing versus this, pressure that you have to do it. If you do it at your own pace, I'm sure you'll get your own rhythm into actually enjoying it and liking it and doing it because you want to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be consistent. So you can't do anything that you can't keep up, right?
Mhm,
So you got to be consistent, and you just want to make sure, or personally, I look at it as it's medicine. For
mhm.
me, exercising is medicine. It's, people take medicine every single day to prevent certain things from going on in their body and managing certain health conditions. The best one is exercise because it helps so many other conditions and things when it comes to that are related to quality health. So for me, it's medicine. I'm going to get my medicine. I get it every day, at least something to make sure that I can be healthy and I can thrive during this stage of my life.
And so much of that is mental. So when it comes down to thriving in midlife, it's mostly mental. A lot of it's mental.
Yeah.
So how do you help clients shift their identity from "I'm getting old" to "I'm actually just getting started"?
Yeah, we got to change the way they talk, right? Got to change that language because that's what leads to the identity, you know. So, it's the old I'm not getting older, I'm getting better. Those are two completely different identities, right? And so you got to kind of reframe how people think and how they talk, and then you got to make sure, me as a coach, I want to make sure that I'm reinforcing the identity for them and with them. Like somebody who's getting old doesn't come in here and work out like that. Somebody who's getting old doesn't get their heart rate up the way you're doing. Somebody who's old is in home doing meal prep or whatever it may be, right? And so you got to identify those actions or those behaviors because they reinforce that identity, right? And then, once they start believing it, they start talking different, doing different, acting different, and then we're off and running.
Yeah. And is there something like a mantra, affirmation, or some kind of mindset that you personally use when doubt creeps in?
For them or for me?
Well, I guess for you, what you use and also how you use that with your clients? Is there something specific that you use, something you use for your clients? Both? Are they different?
Yeah, for me, I'm just trying to stay aligned with my thoughts and actions.
Mhm.
That's all. I'm just trying to stay in alignment with what I believe. You know, I'm not out here chasing youthful energy, right? I'm not going to get that, right? Okay, that's not coming back because I'm no longer a youth, you know,
Mhm.
but I am out here chasing, intentional midlife energy, you
Mhm.
know, and so aligning myself with my thoughts is how I do it, you know. In terms of other people, I just try to encourage all of my uh, clients and people that I coach, to make sure that the message and the words that they're sharing with themselves are positive, and that they go along with what you want from your health, because you can't talk bad to yourself and then think you're going to be a healthy person. It just doesn't work that way, you know.
Mhm.
So the more you can feed yourself what you want, and then, like I said, I'm just trying to be in alignment with what I want. I'm not always perfectly aligned, but the goal is to be in alignment, you know.
Absolutely. And then when you do have clients that may be doubtful or looking for, I guess, reassurance or anything like that to really push them along, is there any specific like affirmations or ways that you kind of tell them your own mindset to kind of guide them along, or is there anything that you use differently for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I try to just give them examples of what they've done that is different to what they're thinking.
Mm.
And I mean, if you're physically with someone, like if I'm physically with someone in my personal training studio, then I'll just give them challenging tasks to do to demonstrate that you're killing it, and
Mhm.
that, this isn't what, you know a old person would do. Your balance is great. Your this is this. They're pushing solid heavy weights because all my clients are strong as hell. And so they kind of they kind of know where they are. In terms of their lane or their peers, and that's enough generally to keep people going, because they see and they know what they don't want, right? And if you know what you don't want, then you also know what you want from your health and from your body too.
Absolutely. And what does your own version of thriving look like today? And what is one area that you're still working on?
Yeah, for me, like I said, thriving for me is that freedom that, I mentioned before. Um, I know that, I'm not looking for a destination. I'm just looking to get better at that whole thriving concept. And, for me, I'm working on a couple areas because all of us are work in progress. That's just the way this thing works. The minute you're not a work in progress, you are on the decline. And so for me, sometimes, I get creative at nighttime. The next thing I look up, it's 12 o'clock. Oh man, I'm not gonna sleep the amount of time I should, and that's gonna end up hampering my recovery. You know, Sometimes when I'm out, I have a few too many cocktails, and I know that that's going to impact me either the next day or my sleep, or somehow in a way that may not be the best, And so we're all out here on this journey, and the goal is just to become better and better at thriving, knowing that perfection is not realistic. And all we want to do is keep being better versions of ourselves and keep challenging ourselves in ways that will allow us to thrive.
Absolutely. And it, like you've said in other episodes prior to this, it's not about perfection. And yes, there's going to be nights you may not get enough sleep and There may be nights you go out and have one too many drinks, but you could still thrive to be better and still also allow yourself that little bit of grace to, live your life. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. Just know that you still have to thrive to be better and keep those, I think, decisions at the forefront of your mind too. And not to like also, beat yourself up about it and have that hinder your day-to-day habits that you've built already.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, you're gonna have those times. You're gonna have resets, right? I have resets, but every repetition, every choice, resets behavior. I'm for all of it
Hmm.
because all of it is really what allows you to get better and better at thriving, you know? And so that's how I look at it, and that's how I manage it, for myself. Everybody's a little bit different, but I think the goal is, again, to just become better and better at thriving.
Absolutely. And even part of thriving is to continue thriving.
Mhm.
So just,
Exactly. It's not a destination, so you're never going to hit it. It's
Mhm.
not it's not like you put it in the GPS and then it tells you the path and then you get there and you're here. It doesn't work that way. It just
Mhm.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and growth never stops. It's a continuation
Hmm.
always. So like you said, you're never
Yep.
gonna get there. Just keep getting better,
Sure.
thrive, and yeah, growth never stops. It's a continuous thing that you could only continue to try to get better. There's no such thing
Sure.
as
And it
perfection,
and
but
it doesn't
try
it
to do it.
doesn't the opportunity for that doesn't end at midlife. And
Mhm.
that's the message for that a lot of people need to hear, right? You
Mhm.
know, um, just because you're 40, 50, 60 doesn't mean that you can't learn, that you can't act, that you can't implement, that you can't change. There's that's a bunch of BS.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah, it's never too late to implement new things within your life or do something new or
Hmm.
anything like that, for sure. But so I think that this episode rather was definitely a wake up call. Midlife is not a deadline. It's actually a doorway if you think about it like that. If you've been telling yourself it's too late, if you've been telling yourself it's too hard or it's too complicated, today is really your sign to just start rewriting that script. Share this with someone who needs it, who needs to hear it. Listen to it over and over for yourself if you need to hear it. And remember, you're not over the hill. You're just getting warmed up. And like I said, send it to someone who's either in midlife, and even if they're not, someone that can benefit from it as well. Thank you so much, Doug, for this episode, and we will chat next week.